How exactly do you break an unbreakable empire? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the cinematic epic of Moses. We're going to take this deeply dramatic historical retelling and unpack it as a literal masterclass on power, identity, and liberation. This isn't just a story about ancient plagues. It's actually a fascinating blueprint for how absolute authority operates, and more importantly, how it can be completely dismantled. Let's get right into it. Every Hebrew boy who was born will be thrown into the river. I want silence. I want control. Wow. Just listen to the chilling reality of absolute power in that quote. Silence and control. These aren't just buzzwords, right? They're the ultimate goals of the Egyptian empire. See, the ruling class was absolutely terrified of the growing Hebrew population. And their response? Well, it definitely wasn't diplomacy. It was systematic extermination. To maintain the illusion of a totally unbreakable society, authoritarian systems will always demand the blood of the innocent. They literally crush dissent before it can even speak. 1520 BC. That single number completely anchors us in an era of just unimaginable brutality. Try to imagine generations born into dust and heat, enduring this never-ending suffering under a regime that crushed their bodies just to break their hope. Those magnificent walls and towering monuments of Egypt, they weren't built by magic. They were built on the backs of enslaved people who were trapped in a suffocating cycle of impossible quotas, brutal whippings, and absolute despair. Part 1, Two Worlds, One Prince. Let's see how a child drawn from the waters is molded by the very system oppressing his people. Can you imagine the psychological whiplash of living two totally contradictory lives? On the one hand, you've got the Egyptian prince. He's groomed in strict discipline, taught to walk with this incredibly firm posture, and totally indoctrinated with the ruthless logic of an empire that just takes what it wants. But beneath all that golden eyeliner, there's the hidden Hebrew. He feels this deep, gnawing uneasiness. He's inexplicably drawn to the suffering in the slums of Goshen, and he's constantly questioning the real moral cost of the luxury he's living in. It's a massive internal tug of war. Order is everything. Without order, there is revolt. Without revolt, there is peace. This quote perfectly captures the core philosophy of Egypt, a total obsession with absolute predictable order. To a tyrant, human emotions, questions, and empathy, those aren't just minor inconveniences. No way. They're incredibly dangerous weaknesses. In this kind of system, peace isn't about harmony at all. It's literally just the absence of rebellion. And that specific brand of peace is only achieved by keeping a heavy, permanent boot on the neck of the oppressed. But, every illusion eventually shatters. And for Moses, that breaking point is violently sudden. He steps out into the labor camps, sees a Hebrew worker being brutally beaten, and in a flash of pure instinct, he catches the whip. By striking down that Egyptian taskmaster, Moses crosses a line he can absolutely never uncross. Suddenly, the palace views him as a traitor, while the Hebrews view him with deep distrust. So, instantly stripped of all his royal protection and identity, the prince becomes a fugitive forced to flee into the desert just to survive. Part 2. Exile in the Desert. So Moses arrives in the harsh desert completely defeated. He's drowning in guilt, totally isolated, and pretty much convinced his life of influence is entirely over. But then Jethro, a local leader, drops this profound shift in perspective. He says, "You think you're buried here? You're not buried. You're just here." Wow, that is such a powerful reminder for anyone who's hit rock bottom, right? Isolation isn't always a graveyard. Sometimes it's just a necessary waiting room. Out there, the harsh desert acts as this slow, deliberate crucible. Year by year, the blowing sands literally strip away the palace mask and the arrogance of the Egyptian prince, replacing it all with the quiet humility of a shepherd. Moses builds this new, quiet life for himself. He discovers that out here, the titles of men mean absolutely nothing. He unlearns the loud, demanding language of power and trades it for the quiet, patient skill of listening to the wind, the night, and his own heart. Part 3. The Divine Call. Just as he builds a quiet life, the impossible happens. Now, this next moment completely upends Pharaoh's entire definition of power. The God speaking to Moses doesn't offer some localized geographical title like the gods of Egypt did. I am who I am. That is a bold declaration of existence itself. It's a direct, uncontainable force. This ultimate authority tells Moses that the cries of the enslaved have been heard and that the divine is actively stepping into human history to act as a liberator. And the wildest twist, he's sending the broken, runaway shepherd to do it. So here's the really big question I want you to keep in mind. How exactly does a runaway, broken shepherd confront the most powerful, unyielding empire on earth? I mean, Moses just freezes. He's totally terrified. Yet he is sent right back into the absolute heart of danger. Think about it. He has no army, zero armor, just his brother Aaron and a simple wooden shepherd's staff. But that staff is no longer just a piece of wood. It's about to become a death sentence against an entire empire. Which brings us to part 4, Breaking the Empire, the ultimate clash of forces. I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. I am order. Pharaoh's immediate reaction is pure, brutal stubbornness. When Moses shows up, Pharaoh doesn't just say no. He actively weaponizes the Hebrews' hope against them. He completely cuts off the straw supply needed for brickmaking, but violently demands the exact same daily quota. It's a chillingly calculated psychological move designed to break their spirits. He's trying to prove that he alone dictates reality, and that looking up to a higher power, well, that's going to bring you nothing but more pain. But since an empire built on force only really understands force, the response is a rapid, systematic dismantling of everything Egypt controls and worships. Let's trace this timeline. It happens in devastating waves. Day 1, their ultimate life source, the water, turns to poison. Days later, the economy literally collapses as livestock drops dead. Weeks in, devastating hail shatters the crops, followed closely by swarms of locusts that devour whatever happened to survive. And finally, 3 days of darkness. A darkness so thick it physically paralyzes the entire nation. We're watching the complete unmaking of a superpower. And this brings about the ultimate, undeniable role reversal. Look at the stark contrast between these two worlds. On one side, you have Egypt's chaos. The mighty empire is entirely blinded, sitting paralyzed in terrifying darkness, completely stripped of their pride and direction. But just miles away, you have Goshen's peace. Where the enslaved Hebrews live, the wind stays clean, the light stays on, and they're protected by the divine. It's such a profound statement, isn't it? A massive line is being drawn in the sand right between the oppressor and the oppressed. Part 5, the final Passover, the breathless climax of our story. So, what happens if the door is not marked? That terrifying question just hangs heavily over the Hebrew camps. I mean, the stakes have literally never been higher. Moses makes it crystal clear that the final, most devastating judgment is hitting Egypt tonight. The empire is going to be struck right at its very heart. For the Hebrews, the only thing standing between life and death tonight isn't a sword or a fortress wall, it's strict, unwavering obedience to some highly specific survival instructions. See, faith in this moment isn't just some quiet internal feeling. It is an urgent, mechanical action required to survive. Step 1, choose a lamb without blemish. Step 2, put its blood on the doorposts and lintels so the destruction passes entirely over their home. Step 3, eat the roasted meat with unleavened bread. But look at step 4. This is absolutely key. They have to keep their belts fastened and sandals on, ready to leave in a hurry. That is the literal physical posture of a people who truly believe they are about to be liberated in a matter of hours. Rise up, get out from among my people. Take your sheep, your cattle, and go. In the wake of an absolutely devastating, agonizing night, the grand illusion of Pharaoh's absolute power just shatters into a million pieces. He summons Moses, and he doesn't just permit them to leave, he's basically begging them to get out. The man who once demanded total silence and total control is finally brought to his knees, utterly forced to bow to a reality he can no longer manipulate. So the Hebrew people pack whatever they can carry and literally march out of Egypt into the total unknown. But here's the core takeaway of this whole epic. Physical liberation is absolutely not the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a completely new journey. They're trading the crushing, highly ordered weight of slavery for the raw, unstructured, and honestly terrifying freedom of the wilderness. They aren't slaves anymore, for sure. But now they have to figure out how to actually be free. Pharaoh was completely convinced that true power was absolute order and control. But when he was confronted with the unexplainable, his entire quote-unquote unbreakable empire just crumbled. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder long after this explainer ends. In our own modern world, built on rigid systems, endless metrics, and very loud authorities, what truly holds up the walls of power today? And what would it actually take to tear them down? Think about that for a while. Thanks for hanging out with us, and as always, keep asking the big questions.